Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, and welcome to another live session on my Declassified Caribbean channel. I hope that you will be joining shortly. So, we welcome you, and we are on a live. And please let me know if you are hearing me loud and clearly, right? That's very, very important that we have this very important live. Now, we are going to be looking at the IMF and the World Bank. So, what if I told you that while the world is heading toward a war, right? Because we are in the throes of a war. We know that we are in the throes of an war on us in terms of the region or economics are being impacted every day. So what if I told you that while the world is heading toward war, the IMF is telling the Caribbean countries to cut spending, freeze wages, and raise taxes? That is what the IMF always does, right? It cuts and it tells us that we have to ban our bellies, right? At the exact moment people need relief the most, they're telling, we're being told to suffer more. That is what the IMF does. So the question is, are these institutions helping us survive or managing our decline? And I think that it's time for us now to come to grips with these institutions. We call them the Washington Consensus institutions, and they believe in conservative economic policies. The IMF and the World Bank are by no stretch of the imagination progressive institutions. They are, in fact, very conservative. So this afternoon, we are talking about the IMF and the World Bank, but to understand what they are doing to the Caribbean today, you have to understand where this all started. Now, these institutions were created in 1944, just after the throes of World War II at Bretton Woods, right after World War II. The idea was simple: stabilize the global economy and help countries rebuild. But here's the reality for the Caribbean. Most of our countries don't even gain independence until the 1960s and the 1970s. And almost immediately, we were pulled into a global financial system we didn't design. And if we remember what happened during the 1970s and the oil crisis, and that forced many of us to have gone to the IMF. And, people like the Michael Mandes of Jamaica, they recounted that history, how horrific it was, and how it seemed to have been that time was when the petrodollar was created, that we're talking about now that might be on the verge of a collapse. Now, remember now in the 1970s, we were facing an oil crisis. I think fast forward to 2026, we are now facing the collapse, a dollar crisis, as it were. The US dollar crisis. That is the moment. That's our era. Let us see what is going to happen. And I'm sure that the IMF and the World Bank are gearing up for that collapse. By the 1970s and 1980s, when oil prices spiked and global interest rates rose, Caribbean economies already dependent on imports and vulnerable to shocks fell into debt. So that's when the IMF stepped in. But the help came with conditions. They call them structural adjustment programs. And that is what we have been known for here in the Caribbean region, particularly, and in Latin America, where they impose upon us very, very strict conditionalities. So we have to cut our, healthcare, education, other social safety net systems and operations. We have to cut everything, and saying that, oh, you're indebted, so you have to pay your debt. And here's what these programs demanded across the Caribbean: cut public spending, devalue local currencies. And we're facing that, particularly in Jamaica, where they opened the economy in the 1990s, remove subsidies. And subsidies are when the government is helping people who are poor to be able to survive, right? To alleviate suffering. Privatize state assets, as in some cases we saw with Air Jamaica, perhaps CAL too, Caribbean Airlines, I'm not sure. Open markets to foreign competition. In Jamaica, in Guyana, And across the region, this wasn't theory, right? This was real life. Wages stagnated, the cost of living went up, local industries collapsed under foreign competition, and governments were told this was the only path to stability. And that is what they always say to us, that this is the only path, this is the only route that you can take for progress in your society. So when we talk about austerity today in 2026, in a time of global insularity, right, or instability, I should say, rising conflict and economic pressure, this is not new. And I'm saying that in the 70s and the 80s, we suffered oil crisis. I think we are now suffering a dollar crisis. And very soon, even Trinidad and Tobago, even in Trinidad, they're suffering. They don't have a lot of dollars, and it's going to spread throughout the region. And they're going to come and they're going to tell us that we have to cut and curve. That is exactly what the IMF is meant to do. This is a continuation of a model that the Caribbean has been living under for over 40 years that has stagnated our growth. So the real question tonight or this afternoon is not just what the IMF is doing now, it's whether the Caribbean ever truly escaped the system in the first place, which I don't think we have ever escaped the system. Some of you will call it the Babylonian system. All right, so let's greet each other. Now we have Marie saying good evening, Professor and my dear Caribbean. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Marie. And then we have the audio is fine here. Thank you so much for letting me know that. And you're right, Life and Debt, the DVD showed this about Jamaica. Yes, the Life and Debt was a very important, documentary that was made in which the former Prime Minister of Jamaica, Michael Manley, spoke about the IMF, and he spoke about it eloquently. Now, the fact is that he himself had to submit to the whole economic pressures of the IMF and the World Bank in the 70s and also in his second term, 1989 to 1992, when he had to demit office due to illness in 1992. So those of you who haven't watched that, Life and Debt, you should go and watch that, and you'll see what the IMF did to economies like Jamaica and also other economies around the world. Now, Jamaica was just used as a model, as a showcase. It's not the only one. All other countries that have ever dealt with the IMF, that they actually suffered those what we call structural adjustment programs. And what they do is suffocate your economy. And when you cannot no longer take the suffering, then governments have to submit to their conditionalities, and their conditionalities are often hard. And then we blame our governments that they're the ones who are making us suffer. But the fact of the matter is that the IMF, and the IMF, by the way, is connected to war, right? It's a part of the US military-industrial complex. And if countries don't accede to their, what you call it now, their conditionalities, the United States can send its military in. And back in the days, it used to, but it used to do it in a more, I want to say, it was more covert. When they would send their military, they would say that something is happening, maybe a drug person needs to be apprehended. But nowadays, they're doing it boldly. So we are seeing now that the United States can say, well, they don't want to accept my economic conditionalities, let's send the military in and take out the president, kidnap him as they did to President Maduro. Now, a shame on Manley never had a chance to push through his plan, socialism in Jamaica. Well, Manley became we don't know if he became, but he actually pursued capitalist neoliberal policies when he came back to office in 1989. So the PNP, the People's National Party, they moved away from their socialist agenda and ideology after the 1970s. For those of you who don't know, and we have had, there are videos online to people, there's nothing that I'm saying that is not verified, that are not verifiable facts. In fact, the ex-wife of Prime Minister Michael Manley, that is, what's her name again? Beverly Anderson Manley. She said that, when Michael Manley, after he had demitted office, after he lost the election in the 1980s, that he felt lonely his class, that's the class that he belonged to, they alienated themselves from him. They isolated him from that class. As a result of that, he thought that he had to, do what they wanted him to do in order to be accepted or by his social class, his social and economic class. So we have to understand that these governments and or politicians, they belong to a certain class, and oftentimes they are pressured by the class from which they hail to do exactly what these foreign institutions want them to do. So IMF is even more entrenched into the Caribbean countries more than ever. IMF just recently took Jamaica finance minister, some of that nature, and put him on their board. Absolutely, Nigel Clark, because he did exactly what they told him to do, and Jamaica suffered for that, has suffered, and continues to suffer for that. But they are going to make him, one of the model. And notice that after Dr. Nigel Clark went to work for the IMF, then they used him as the poster child to send him to Africa to convince Africans that they also need to follow IMF conditionalities. So that is what they do. And I was very, struck that the Africans are not impressed with that, even though you have Nigel Clark, who is coming from Jamaica. But Africans understand that the IMF is not a good institution. So I don't think the IMF and the World Bank were successful in sending Nigel Clark to Africa and other third world countries, because many people, they understand, particularly in Latin America, they know what the IMF is. They know what they do and the destruction that they wreak up on, those of us who are what we call third world or members of the global south. So we need to be aware of that, and we need to watch what they're doing. In fact, there are allegations, rumors, that Trinidad and Tobago might be joining also the IMF in short term. Okay, so, and because of the fact that many, the country is facing problems with the dollar or the lack of Forex, so that might be a cause. And what is going to happen if they do that? They are going to devalue the currency. So Trinidadians have to watch that too. If this shortage of Forex continues, the IMF is going to step in and it's going to devalue your currency, right? And then the cost of living goes up, your savings goes down, and it's going to be hell on earth. That happened to Jamaica in the 1990s, and many manufacturing bases were closed and stuff like that, all because of IMF principles. Now, what they do, they're very, very much subtle in their economic policies. So they will say your debt is going down, and you can see it where your debt is going down, but they set these conditionalities in which they are taking away from the poor to give to the wealthy, and then they say that your debt is down. Jamaica was about to achieve the 60% of GDP that they said that Jamaica should have acceded to, which we did in 2013. What happened now after Hurricane Melissa and it destroyed and ravaged the economy? Jamaica has gone back to square one, to square zero, not square one, but square zero, or ground zero, whatever you want to call it, right? So it's something that is a cycle that it will never leave you. This IMF is something that we have to study, because they say that they come and they go, and then they set benchmark for us, and then if we don't accomplish it, then they continue to impose even more stringent conditionalities until the entire economy is suffocated. But when they do these things, what we have to do in the Caribbean is to sell off our assets. So whatever prime assets you have, you sell it off to foreigners in the name of reducing your debt, because that is their underlying, message that they have for us, that we need to lower our debt. But what does it mean? At what cost do we lower our debt? And yes, we should try to live within our means, but at the same time, we cannot sell off everything, and we can't privatize the entire government, which they have been able to do and have convinced our governments to do. Jay is saying that IMF, World Bank are there as debt traps for these nations. They only pick on countries who aren't powerful economically. Yes, and they pick on countries too that they know the leaders are not as strong as and will not stand up to them. For example, Mr. Edward Siaga, even though he was corrupt himself, but he stood up to them in the 1980s. So when it came back now to the election of Mr. Manley in 1989 in Jamaica, he was once an enemy their own enemy, but they used the politicians against each other. So even though Michael Manley was an enemy of the IMF in the 1970s, when he came back to power in 1989, he promised the IMF and the World Bank that the same policies that he rejected in the 1970s, he was going to implement them, and worse, in the 1990s. So do you see how they play our politicians? So you had Michael Manley, who was opposed to the IMF and the structural adjustment programs. And then when he came back to power, Mr. Seager was on their side in the 1980s and he won the election, right? They allowed him to win the election. And when now Mr. Manley wanted to come back to power in 1989, he decided to follow all of the agenda and the policies implemented that he was against in the 1970s. So this is how the politicians play the game so that they can win the election. Now, Mr. Manley on life and death, it doesn't seem like he was convicted that the IMF and the World Bank were good institutions, but he followed them because he wanted to gain back power. So our politicians, sometimes they do not act out of conviction. They act on how they can win, right? The policies that they can implement so that they can win back power. And that's exactly what Michael Manley did. And the PNP moved away from its socialist principles. Now, Jason, get the DVD, everyone, and watch the extra where Michael Mann explains how he tried to get away from the IMF and wanted to get help from the Soviet Union, but the Soviet Union refused. Right. And this is the thing about it. You know, a lot of times we think that because some, world power might be against the United States, is that it's on our side. It doesn't mean that because Iran or the Soviet Union might stand up to the United States, which the Soviet Union did, that is going to, acknowledge us as their partners. It does not mean that. And we will never learn our lessons from history. We always think that anybody who opposes the United States, it means therefore that they're on our side. And it doesn't mean that. As you're saying, J.A., Michael Manley asked the Soviet Union and they refused. Perhaps they thought, Jamaica had just too many black people. Those were some of the rumors that Jamaica had just too many black people and they did not want to associate themselves with all of these black people. So talk much about we're all equal and all of that stuff, rubbish. And we are the ones who need to build economies that suggest that we are independent. Caribbean leaders are too incompetent and corrupt, right? And what happens to we are small economies, so we don't have any clout. That is what we also have to understand. We do not have as much economic clout as we think we do. Culturally, we are great, because we really, we came from Africa and, the Caribbean, African Americans, we have created a culture that is second to none. So we are a cultural melting pot, yes, and a cultural global power, the Caribbean region is, but economically, we are weak. And sometimes I think we believe that our culture overrides our economy, but it's the economy that we should be playing or placing more attention on than our culture. So we tend to look at the shaggies and the or sports and all of that, and we get very carried away. We get carried away with these things. So we are entertaining massa, right? But they are taking away from us, our economy, which without a steady economy, then we really are slaves, right? We have to grow up right now. So Jamaican leaders pocketed all that IMF money, yes. Now, it's not only the Jamaican leaders. Remember now that the IMF works along with the private sector. So the private sector organization of Jamaica, the oligarchs there, and they work, of course, along with the political leaders. So they're going to have the politicians get their portion, right? And also the private sector, the oligarchs, will also get their portion of money from these people. Soviet Union were already helping out Cuba and didn't want to mess that up also. Yes, and eventually, we understand that the Soviet Union fell and, they went along with the neoliberal agenda. Remember now that after the Soviet Union fell, the United States went into Russia and some others of the Soviet Union blocs, and they did the same, implemented the same neoliberal policies there in Russia. And that is why we have to, I'm not taking any sides. I'm telling you that we are living in a world now where we have to look at systems of power, and we have to wonder, are these systems of power on our side? Or are they just using us as a means of exploiting us so that they can empower themselves in their, quest for world domination? That is what we have to understand, that it's not just the United States against Cuba or Russia against Iran, etc., etc. It is a global system of power that we have to look at. But I don't think we are yet understanding that. And when it's too late, we're going to realize that we are going to be right here enslaved in the region because we are siding with our very enemies. Now, we look at, very true, we don't control our economies. We don't. Resources, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Barbados, etc., majority of the land, resources, etc., are controlled by the United States, European countries, etc. Yeah, they're still, the slave masters are still here. And we can see in our tourism sector that they control. And that is what we like to see. We like to see tall buildings, but who control these tall buildings, right? And that is for us development. When we see highways and we see all of these gigantic buildings, then we say, yes, Jamaica or Trinidad to the world. But you have to research who controls the tourism sector, who controls this sort of new condominium and all of these houses and apartment complexes that you're seeing being built in the country. And who can buy them? Who are able to afford them? So you find that many people are coming in now, the Chinese and the Indians and whatever, and they're buying up these things. And eventually we're going to find ourselves not being any part of the economy, just, bystanders, right? So we have to be careful in light of, make sure you're liking the video and you're sharing the live with others so that they can join the live. Very important conversation that we need to have. Right, about, because our economics is something that we have to pay attention to. And as I'm saying, I think the US dollar is about to evaporate into thin air. If that happens, they are sort of reimagining right now as we speak a new global currency. Right, that is what they're doing, which is going to be digitized. It's going to be a digital sort of currency and no longer the US dollar. So when we hear the US is falling, we have to also be careful and look carefully at what other people are saying. And do we have now, are we witnessing the consolidation, the concentration of global power? All right, so we look at exactly, we have here Rui Sandoz, yeah, that is, what they call that again, that hotel there, all controlled by Europeans. Sandoz is from Butch Stewart, right? And Adam Edwards, his son, is running it these days. And if you notice, Adam Stewart and Butch Stewart, they're very close to some of the American oligarchs. During the pandemic, Butch Stewart was always frequently on some of these cable network channels coming out of the United States. So these people are connected, and some of our oligarchs, whether in Trinidad or in Barbados or in Guyana, they are connected, and sometimes they're family members of some of these American oligarchs. So don't believe that because they call themselves Jamaicans or Trinidadians or Barbadians, it means therefore that they are on your side. Many times because they're connected to some of these groups by familial ties. Sometimes by familial ties, and that is what we have to understand. We have here, yes, Fazli saying, this is why I think that this war with Iran is contrived and fixed to bring in this digital currency. Yes, and there was a video yesterday which I watched. I think it has accrued almost 1 million views now, in which this guy, I think his name is Andre something, can't remember the last name, but he was talking about that the war that is now, being played out, they are actually working to reimagine a different global economic order, which they are going to completely destroy the dollar. And he's suggesting that the dollar, when it's destroyed, what they're going to do, they're going to privatize American debt, okay, and pass it on to us. So our phones and through all our bank accounts and everything that we have connected to this global system, debt will be passed on to us. And if we dissent, then they will do what they do in China. If you are not playing by the game, right, then they won't allow you to withdraw any funds from your bank account. Do you understand the credit score system in China? If you don't do what the government tells you to do, you can find that one day you go to the bank or you pop trying to get money on your account or to pay for something and it says rejected. Not because you don't have any money, but because the system doesn't allow you to participate in it until you conform to government rules and regulations. Okay, so we have to understand that this is where we are heading. This is where we are heading. And some of us, the only time that we are going to talk about it when it's too late, it's when we see the fear and the doom. We don't have any money. Right now, the scare, we're not fearful of that. We think that the war, America is being fought against Iran and Iran is going to win and all of that. Because again, that is how we are wired. And that is not how the game is played. Now we have Butch Stewart. Sorry, thanks for the correction. Butch Stewart, yes, Butch Stewart, yeah. Then we have Thazy saying these oligarchs have no country, right? They transcend national borders, right? And let me say, they are not a monolith too. We can't see them as the same. The global oligarchs, just like Trinidadians are not a monolith. Barbadians are not, Jamaicans are not. You have different types of Jamaicans. You have different types of different classes of Jamaicans, different classes of Trinidadians, different classes of Barbadians, etc., etc. So the same thing with the global elites. Even though they are in the minority, they don't all see eye to eye, and they do wage wars against each other. And they want to, their ideology, their worldview, they want to dominate. So they are indeed fighting. Right? But it's not for our good. It's not for our freedom. All right? So don't see the global elites also as in a vacuum, in a one box, and Butch and all of these people are working together and they're all smiling behind the scenes and sitting in one room. It doesn't work like that. But what it does, they have interest, just like all what we call white people are not together. They have their differences, don't they? But when it comes on to people of color, they pretty much, remove those sort of differences so that they can keep us down and keep us enslaved. Okay, so we have to look at the global elites from that perspective. Don't just see all of them as being unified, because they're not unified. When will you have Mr. Pereira and Mr. Corbyn? Yeah, I invited Mr. Pereira back on the program. He didn't come I don't know what, he didn't respond. Mr. Corbyn is having some problems. He's trying to rectify those. So as soon as he's able to, we will have them back on. But I did invite Mr. Pereira to come on this live, but he didn't respond. So their knowledge and wisdom on these matters is second to none. Yeah, and that is true. That is true. Then we have here, is Jesus Christ, you see here? Will oil discovery in Jamaica by United Oil and Gas change Jamaica economy, or will it stand up like Nigeria? We know that answer already, right? We saw what happened in Venezuela, right? So this is obvious that the United States is going to control. We are seeing what is happening in Guyana. And it would have been nice to have Mr. Pereira on to talk about that, to expound on that the Guyanese are complaining that they are not getting anything much from their oil. So any oil that is discovered in Jamaica, and the professor here, Professor Hinson, a Guyanese American scholar, was on the show sometimes last year, and he was saying since the discovery of oil in Guyana, the cost of living has soared astronomically. He's saying that as a retired professor, it's almost impossible for him to buy a home in Guyana. That's what he was saying. Professor Hinson, an outstanding Guyanese American intellectual, was saying that from a very prestigious, he taught at the University of California, right? And he was saying that it would be, impossible economically for him to buy a home in Guyana. And you'd think that the economy is booming and growing, at 30% sometimes, 15%, 20 whatever percent, and yet still the cost of living is going up. So the cautious Jamaicans, if oil is discovered, the same thing is going to happen there. The cost of living is going to soar, and you're going to see that, people are going to be exploited. Okay, so the oil that we're talking about now is not going to belong to us, because in the first place, we don't have the equipment to explore it. Okay, and we can't refine it in many ways and stuff like that. So these people are going to come with their expertise, and then they're going to tell us how the show should be run, and not we the people dictating the show. So don't think that this is the 1970s now. All right, we're living in a different era, and it doesn't mean, therefore, because we have these resources, it means that we are rich. We, the citizens, are rich. It just means that the global oligarchs and the domestic ones are the ones to benefit and to gain from it. Okay, so we need to now get wiser. That is exactly what happened in Venezuela, happening around the entire globe. The J is saying Haiti has a oil reserve bigger than Venezuela. Also, that's what I heard too. Hence, why America and the core group have control of Haiti. Absolutely. So it doesn't mean, therefore, that we are going to be in control of the oil. Great if it's found. I mean, I'm not saying now that it's going to be a terrible thing. But what I'm saying to you, don't have your hopes, grow thinking that we are going to be, growing fast. And we might grow fast, but it's not going to be in the interest of the majority of Jamaicans, just like, what is happening there in Guyana. So we must also be able to connect the dots. We cannot just look at one country and say that this is the reality. We have to connect the dots all across the region. What is happening in Guyana, what is happening in Trinidad, what is happening in Antigua, and that is why we cannot just look at one country. We have to read the newspapers as far as we can, as much as we can rather. We have to take them up and read them and see how what is happening in Trinidad might be applicable to what is happening in Guyana, etc., etc., etc. And many of us are not doing it. We are so nationalistic that we close our minds and think that we are living in a vacuum. And we're no longer living in a vacuum. Okay, we're no longer living in national borders where we can say, okay, I am protected against what is happening in Jamaica or what is happening in Guyana. Okay, it doesn't work like that. It has never worked like that, but more so today, it's not working like that. Make sure you're saving the live, you're sharing the live. And I also want you to send me when I produce a video, because I'm having problem with distribution on YouTube. When I send out a video, are you seeing it in the link in your homepage? Are you seeing the videos when I publish them? Are you seeing them in your home feed, or do you have to go searching for them? There are people who are also telling me that they're seeing their comments missing. I don't delete any comments at all. Right? Whether I agree with the comment or disagree with your comment, I do not delete any of your comments. So if you comment on a video and the thing disappears, it goes somewhere, it's not me. It has to be the system that is doing it. So I'm asking you, after publishing a video, are you seeing it in your home feed? Some people are telling me also that the thing is delayed. Your responses are delayed when I'm on the live. So YouTube deletes comments, right? YouTube deletes comments, right? There was somebody who asked me, said, I made a very firm comment and you deleted it. No, I don't delete any comment, and that's the truth. That's the honest truth. Whether I agree with you or disagree with you, and even if I answer you in a very rough manner or whatever, I leave it there, right? Because it's good to have different perspectives so that people can see, and respond to, we can have, a respectful and decent conversation, though we might disagree. Okay, so no, I don't. So please let me know in the comment section, even now, when I dispatch the videos, do you see them in your home page, in the home page, on the home, the feed? Do you get them in your feed? Please let me know. Very, very important. And I also did a survey, a poll that I posted on the community page, asking you that and to comment on your experience with the distribution, because YouTube, they're not acknowledging that the videos are not being sent out. And, and there's no hard evidence I have. I can't tell them. But I understand that something is wrong in the way how the videos are being sent out. Okay, so please let me know if that is happening, if that is your experience. Now, yeah, so we are back. Let's go back to our IMF and the World Bank. And we were saying that these institutions have been set up to actually to paralyze our economies. They're not here to save our economies from any, from debt, as they're telling us, right? Because if they're telling us to sell off everything, then how are we going to be able to secure our own independence? And that's exactly what they don't want us to do. They want us to be a part of an economic infrastructure that is totally controlled by them. And that is the purpose of the IMF institution. Now, I could see, let me see if I can share with you a brief video of, some people who are talking on it about how the IMF and the World Bank turn Latin America's debt into control. Let me on the screen. All right. Okay. Let me share the screen with you so that we can look at and talk about some other people's perspective, right? So let me share. I don't know why I'm freezing up on the screen too when I'm showing you a video. I don't know why that is happening too. So how the IMF? Let me get this here.
But the IMF and World Bank's programs in the 80s and 90s, they weren't lifelines. They were handcuffs. So let's start with what this all is. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, both run by US and European powers, offered loans to countries drowning in debt during the 1980s crisis. But there was a catch. There always is. You only got the money if you signed on to the structural adjustment programs, or SAPs. On paper, they promised economic stability. In reality, they stripped countries' control over their own economies. Governments had to cut public spending, privatize state-owned industries, end subsidies on food and fuel, and open their markets to foreign companies. Translation: schools gutted, hospitals collapsed, public jobs erased, and corporations swooped in to buy everything cheap. Take Jamaica in the 1980s. Prime Minister Michael Manley resisted, but debt forced his hand. IMF reforms meant U.S. imports flooded the island. Local farmers and dairies couldn't compete. And the result? Jamaica went from feeding itself to depending on American canned goods and powdered milk. Zambia had to privatize its copper mines. And who profited? Foreign investors, of course. Who lost? The Zambian people. Poverty spiked, schools fell apart. Healthcare collapsed. Mexico in 1994. After years of SAP-style reforms, the peso collapsed. The U.S. bailed out Wall Street investors, but Mexican workers were left jobless and broke. This wasn't random. Ghana, Nigeria, Bolivia, Peru, Kenya, same formula, same results. Cut, privatize, depend. And this wasn't just some faceless bureaucracy. This was political. U.S. President Ronald Reagan and UK Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, the architects of neoliberalism, demanded that the IMF and World Bank export their free market playbook worldwide. It was the 80s version of colonization. The WTO, the World Trade Organization, and trade deals like NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, were built on the same SAP principles. Open your markets, let U.S. corporations in, and kill protections for your people. And the cruelest piece? SAPs forced countries to grow cash crops, coffee, cocoa, sugar, all for export, while abandoning food security. So when global prices tanked, people starved. That was the reality. SAPs weren't about saving economies. They were about making sure that the global south stayed in permanent dependency. So when people sneer and just say that those countries are corrupt, remember this. Their economies were re-engineered deliberately, not broken by accident, broken on purpose. They called it restructuring.
Okay, yeah, thank
but
you.
The IMF and World Bank's programs in the 80s and 90s, they weren't lifelines.
Right. So we're seeing that. We're seeing what happened, what she's saying, that this was not done just coincidentally. It happened by purpose. It was purposeful that they actually did what they did, so that they can suffocate our economies. Because as they do that now, the United States and other global power can be able to control the world market, right? And to control us. And that is exactly what they're doing. So we have IMF was meant for European countries after World War II. Yes, it helped to build them. But remember too that even though the United States was helping through the Marshall Plan, the European countries, it was also controlling them. Right, so that is why we have that Europe now, from the after World War II, has always been a fiefdom, American fiefdom, they're also client states of the United States. And that's why they have to do exactly, they pretend sometimes as if they're not, but they have to do exactly what the United States asks them to do. So anytime anybody lends you a loan, and that's what the United States did with the Marshall Plan, even though the European countries did pay them back, pay the United States back, but the United States, through the petrodollar, in the 1970s, was able to impose that sort of control over the world, including European states. Right? So we have to be aware of this history. We must be aware of the IMF, the World Bank, the structural adjustment programs, which many of us in the Caribbean region are not so much, up on. We are up on what is happening with Carifta and all of that stuff, but we're not up on these matters. Very true. Plus, Americans are Europeans anyways. So that relationship has always been there between Europe and the US. Yeah, and that is what we're saying, that even though they might not necessarily, because they've also had a very turbulent history, Europeans and Americans, right? Don't believe again that they are united, because they're not. Even Europe is not united. But the fact of the matter is that they unite where they need to unite against the global South. That is for sure. Europe understands a small continent, small region. So what it does, it unites so that it blocks any other continent or, people of color from gaining world domination. And that's exactly what they were doing with the Marshall Plan after World War II. Plus, U.S. industries took over the world: Goodyear tires, Ford, Nike, right, Woolworth, etc., etc. Absolutely, and that's exactly what they do. Now, we are now in the 2026, okay? So we are probably facing, yes, another oil crisis, because we are now hearing that the Strait of Hormuz is closed and we don't know what's going to happen, even though we're hearing Trump says that he has now come to a ceasefire. But we know that we can't trust Trump and the global elites, because when they do say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon you. We saw where the United States on many occasions said that it had reached some agreement with Iran and then it bombed them. So we have to be careful of what we're hearing, what they're saying. And if Iran should be bombed, as Trump was threatening them that he's going to bomb the entire civilization, which is crazy that a US president could even utter those words out of his mouth, right? What is going to happen if that takes place, bombing this civilization, which I hope it doesn't happen? How is it going to affect us in the region? We have to start thinking about that. When it comes to war, etc., they're pretty much all on the same page. Absolutely. US and Europe are on the same page. And I will also, expand that our people, including the Caribbean and Africa and Asia, are on the same page too. Because why are they on the same page? How does China and Russia, how do China and Russia benefit from wars? They make weapons too. Right? So the fact of the matter, if the Iranians want to buy weapons, then the Chinese will sell them, Russia will sell them, and they make money. So understand that all of the global elites around the world, even though they're not united, but they are united around wars, because wars are profitable. So whether it's for the Americans or for the Russians or for Chinese, it is still profitable. That just like how slavery was profitable, right? Slavery was profitable. So the same thing with the war machine, that is also another profitable industry that they do not want to finish, and that's why they create wars. And people would be wondering, how could they even look up at another individual and say that they're a chattel, that they are just animals, they're just objects? Because of money and greed and power. And the same thing they're doing with the wars. So don't believe that the Russians and the Chinese are innocent while the North Americans are the ones who are the guilty ones, right? All of them are in it for power and for money. Strait was always open, was just closed to the US, Israel, and the countries who supported them. Iran was ensuring that ships can only enter and leave the strait if they paid in Chinese yuan. Well, the fact is that if it is close to the US and Israel, then we know that we're going to be impacted. Because what happened is that the United States controls the world, particularly here in the Western Hemisphere. We saw what was happening to Venezuela, right? Remember that? Are we forgetting what happened in Venezuela? That Venezuela could not send its oil, all right? Could not send its oil to other countries, could not sell its own oil to other countries. The United States blocked them from doing that. Okay, and I'm wondering if we've forgotten that. So even though it might not, as you're saying, close to other countries, but the United States can impose on these countries that if they do this, if they do that, then they're going to impose some sort of sanctions. This is what the United States is doing in the world right now. The same thing with Cuba, right? The Russians and, well, eventually the Russians were able to do it, send some oil to Cuba to help them. But the fact is that the United States was blocking oil from, for any aid going into Cuba. Right, this is what, and even in the Caribbean region, some of us had to obey what the U.S. said. Okay, even though some of us wanted to help. So we are living now in a time, in an era where we can say this is happening, but the fact is that if the United States, if we don't obey their instructions, other countries, that is, their so-called allies or partners, then they are going to be slapped with different sanctions. So this is where now we have to be very careful and be very mindful. We cannot at this point in time look at just a war between the US and Iran. And if we're doing that, we have to look at the consequences that is going to happen to us. How are we going to be impacted? What is going to happen to us? The future of the dollar. What do you think? Let us now reason. What do you think is the future of the American dollar? We have Jay saying that Iran has shown that they control all the cards here. It appears that way. But it might not be that way. You see, then the optics that we have, it appears that they're in control now, but how will it eventually happen? And even if they're in control, how is it affecting us? Because the price of oil is still going up. Let us say Iran is still in control, right? The price of oil continues to go up. And then when the cost of that goes up, then what happens? Or the cost of living goes up. So let us remove now our biases and say Iran is winning the war. How is that benefiting us in the region? From an economic perspective. Let me know your thoughts on that. And where do you see the dollar going? Because the dollar is going to have to be destroyed. Why? Because the United States is now almost $40 trillion in debt. Okay, and they cannot continue like that. It's not going to be able to be continued like that. That's for sure. That is for sure. So where are we transitioning to? Remember, the United States had to also reform. Okay, 2 times we have well, I would say probably 3 or 4 times. We had the economic infrastructure reimagined, and the first one was after World War II, right? They had to change the entire economic structure into an American-led financial, which it is still an American-led financial institution. And we saw where the United States pretty much controlled the globe because everybody was indebted to the United States, right, including Europe. Then in 1973, because the United States was so much in war, the war against Vietnam was very, very much a blow to the United States economically. Right, the economical United States went dry, and then it was also in other wars like the Korean Wars, right, other wars in Guatemala and other things that it was actually fighting. So the United States really had come to a point where it was about to die. Do you know in the 1970s, the United States could have collapsed economically in the 1970s? So what did it do? It decided that it would join in partnership with the same Gulf states. And that is when they created the petrodollar, and they left the gold standard. That gold did not back the US dollar in the 1970s under Nixon, right? Then they joined efforts and say, we will protect you. So they said to Saudi Arabia and some of these other Gulf states that we will protect you in that you send. And I mean, in the hopes that you will sell all the oil and gas that you produce in US dollar. And that is how the United States has been able to get a free lunch from all of the world, because we pay our debt in dollars and we buy also gas and oil in US dollars. So that was another restructuring of the global economy by the US. So the US could have fallen also in 1970s. If you read the history, you'll see that they were just on the precipice of a collapse. And we could say, yes, it's the end of the world, the US as a global empire. But because of its military might, it was able to reshape the world in an image that it still maintained its global supremacy. Got it? Now, fast forward to 2008, the same thing happened. And the U.S., what did the U.S. do? The U.S. decided that it would, use American taxpayers and their money to what? To get these people who caused the debt in the first place to assist them, the banks. Okay, and that was also another restructuring of the global economy, and that was in favor of the U.S. Still, now we have COVID and this war on Iran. I think that this is now a time that the United States is going to use these, what we call now, disasters to reshape its economy. Remember now that it's through disasters, whether it's man-made wars or hurricanes or earthquakes, whatever, that the United States global powers use to reshape the contours of their empire and their world power. So what might be terrible for us is an opportunity for them. What we consider to be a disaster, because it's affecting us as people, for the global elites, for the US empire, it is an opportunity to even reshape and to make it stronger. So we have to look what it is doing. We have said is saying, answer, what are you saying now? And we have here, most countries using gold as the currency now. Yeah, but the fact of the matter is that they might be using it, but what is still reshaping global economic structure? What currency is still the global reserve currency? The United States dollar. So many people want that United States dollar to go so that they will be able to free themselves and to use their own currencies, their own gold-backed currencies. But the United States so far is trying to prevent that. Why do you think it's trying to gain access into the Middle East? Some people are saying, oh, it's Israel. It's Israel's war. This is not Israel's war. This is the United States war, because the United States know that in that section of the hemisphere in the Middle East, that is where you have the oil and all the precious resources, and that the empire wants to ensure that its petrodollar and whatever global influence that it needs to secure. They're in Africa, in the Middle East. These things are not just coincidental. They have to arrest these parts of the world so that they can maintain their economic and political supremacy. That is what we have to understand. But this is not Israel's war. This is the U.S. war. In fact, the British Empire were already there, right? They were already, and they created this sort of Middle East crisis. The British did, and then they passed it on to the United States of America, long before Israel as a state, as we know it, was ever even created. All right, so let's be very, very clear here on the history. Iran allowed show that they can shut down the world economy with the closing of the strait. America and Israel has no plan and overplayed their hand. Iran told them that they were going to do this. Okay, so let us say, JA, that is happening. How is that beneficial to us in the Caribbean? How is that the fact in your eyes? You're saying that Iran was able to shut down the economy, but how is that going to benefit us in the Caribbean? Do you think the Iranian leaders are thinking about Trinidad and Jamaica and Barbados and other countries, Tobago? Do you think they're doing that? Not everyone now. These Gulf states will never allow the United States to build bases in their countries no more now. They realized they were just used proxy for America and Israel. But a lot of these states they were actually launching attacks on Iran. Are they? I'm not sure I agree 100% with you. I think that they know America can't be trusted, but at the end of the day, they're also benefiting from the wars. They benefit from the wars too. When you have the sale, the oil and gas prices going up, these oligarchs benefit. So, and they're coming from some of these states, right? So I think we still look at one agenda. We think that when we think of countries, we just look at it's the people. But what people are you talking about? Are you talking about the domestic elites, the business interests, or you're talking about the common man? And that is how we have to reason here now, that these global powers and with these oligarchs are not thinking about the common man, really. They're thinking about themselves and how they are going to gather more money, and more money is significant, is synonymous rather with more power. All right, that is what they're thinking. And we have here, Jay is saying, very true, was an American who made up the term Middle East. Yeah. The British, when you look at the British history, they were the ones who created the state of Israel, right? And then the Americans continued. In fact, Americans did not want to even take on Israel, really. But when they understood that in order to control the Middle East, they will have to have a state there, which suggests that they will have to protect that state, because that state is going to be always, they create wars or tensions, forever wars, so that they can always be there. They can always justify their war, right? So let us say, look at, for example, when you have these border countries like Haiti and the Dominican Republic, what they do, they create constant tensions between these two countries that they will never come together and be able to build, because the United States wants to control Haiti, wants to control the hemisphere. So it will allow, neighbors to create tension between each other, like Guyana also, and Venezuela. Trinidad and Venezuela, when there was no tension before. There was absolutely no tension between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela before this, phony war that Trump launched on Venezuela. All right? And who benefits? Again, the oligarchs, not the Trinidadians and the Tobagonians, are not the ones. The common man is not on woman, will not benefit from the wars there. Yeah, so we have Jay saying they were doing these attacks because those leaders in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, etc., are controlled by the U.S., Israel, who allowed them to be in power, right? But you'd have thought now, Jay, as you're saying, that their eyes would have been opened up, and they would now begin to move away from the United States, because that is what Saddam Hussein, but Bin Laden. Bin Laden did that, right? Remember that Bin Laden was also a partner of the United States. He was an ally of the United States. But when he saw that the United States had military bases in all these Muslim countries, he was offended and said, why are these pagans, putting all these military bases here? And, very soon they are going to fight against us, right? So the fact of the matter is that eventually, and then the United States used him and used, other people in the region to do their own dirty work and then leave them hanging. And then Bin Laden got upset and did what he did on 9/11 and in other terrorist attempts that he did. So yes, the United States is creating a lot of enemies, as you're saying, in the Middle East, because people are recognizing that they are being used. However, sometimes for money and power, people put away any sort of rancor and any sort of disagreement, because that's how they make their money. And Iran closing the strait is a message to America that they can shut down the world economy. Oh, I think I read this before. They overplayed their hand. Can't blame Iran for using the leverage hand they tried. Now, what I'm saying, JA, is that Iran, China, Russia, all of them are in it. Why? Because they need a new global order, right? So whether it's Iran, this is a chess game. This is a smoke screen. This is what we're seeing on the news is just to entertain you and to make you feel and to build up your anxiety, and your adrenaline is rushing that, oh yeah, and China is going to do that and Iran is going to do that. But what I'm saying to you, that the global elites are working for a new world order, a one world government or governance. They're not here, so they create wars amongst themselves and tensions that you think that they're against each other when they're not. Okay, so that is what we see the play. Now, it doesn't mean, therefore, that there might not be some individuals who might be against each other and some people might get killed, right, in the process. some of the global elites will be killed. Just like during slavery, some of the slave masters were killed. Okay, it doesn't mean that way, and they had the difference between the South and the Southerners and the Northerners in the United States. Notice though that after the Civil War in the United States, that the South and the North came back together. Right? I give you this sort of history just to make you to contextualize what I'm saying. Andrew Johnson of the United States, the one who succeeded Abraham Lincoln as president of the United States, he pretended to have been against slavery before slavery was finished. Do you know that? Andrew Johnson, a white American president, he was, wow, yes, it's terrible. It's a terrible institution. It had to go. And he said all the niceties that you think an anti-slavery person would say. He said all those words. Do you know that after Abraham Lincoln's death, that he secretively, as president, when Congress was on break, he secretively met with the Southerners because he hated Black people. But what happened is that because he had come from a low-class white person, from white, lower white echelon of society, he said that he was not treated well because he was poor before he became president, right? So what he wanted to do now, he hated the Southern whites because they were in power, they were the slave masters, and they didn't treat him right as a white Southerner who was from a lower class. So he wanted now to be in power against them so he can wield his power and say, you guys were once the slave masters, so I'm now the president of the United States. And that is why he wanted the Southerners to lose, not because he loved Black people. And that should be a great message to us. In fact, Andrew Johnson wanted to reinstitute slavery. He wanted to do that. Congress had to stand up to him. So the fact of the matter is that when we think that this is what is happening, and because somebody might be saying they're standing up to the United States, doesn't mean that they're on your side. It just means, therefore, that they have interests, that economic and political interests that they are fighting for. And that's exactly what Andrew Johnson, rather, of the United States, the former president of the United States, that's exactly what he did. Right? But if you had read his rhetoric, you would believe, thank you, sir, you're standing up against slavery, but he was not. What was his motive? His motive was not that he was anti-slavery. His motive that he was anti people who had exploited him when he was, younger, right? Because he was of a lower American class, white American class. So is Iran doing that because they want to save the world? That's the question for you to answer. Or are they doing things because they want to protect the interests of the oligarchs, of the Iranian oligarchs, among other people? These are questions that we have to ask. But I think we're so much caught up in the news and in the chess game that sometimes we are going to be deceived in the final analysis. During the pandemic, all of them were on the same board. The entire world. I keep on saying that. The entire world was united. Okay? The leaders, not the people. The leaders were united against us. And they did what they did. So you need to watch it and stop thinking that the Iranians are great, and they're doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm looking at how it's going to affect us. What are the consequences of this war, and how will this war affect the average man and woman? I'm concerned, of course, about the Iranians who are being slaughtered. We need a stop to this war. Okay, but I'm saying the elites, the oligarchs believe in wars. They benefit from wars. They're happy that the war is continuing because they make tremendous amount of money, whether from oil or from the sales of arms. Am I clear? Hope that I have expressed myself. We have to now get to understand these basic facts, or we're going to be deceived. So we have here, Jay said, Bin Laden was, Saddam Hussein was also. Saddam fought against Iran at the behest of the Americans in the 1990s, right? Killed over 1 million Iranians. Absolutely, that's what they do. And what if Iran and Iraq had joined up against the United States in those days? then the United States perhaps would not be able to use Israel as a way. But that's what they do. They divide and conquer, weaken the system. But eventually they'll come and get you. And these are the lessons we have to learn here in the Caribbean. People like the Mrs. Kamala Person Besessor, she should know these things so that she can understand that the United States is not just using Trinidad because it wants to fight criminality in the region. They are using Trinidad because Trinidad has oil and gas and other things that they want. Right? That is what they're doing. Okay, so that good afternoon, Julian. And then we have Julian is saying Bin Laden told America to look within for the persons that committed 9/11. Yeah, and they were told. In fact, I understand that they were told, America was told, and they did not take him seriously. How can it be a smokescreen when they've been bombed twice in a year? But that's the whole point. That's the whole point. That's the point we don't understand. That sometimes they will do things that is beyond human reasoning, right? Because as I'm saying to you, the whole matter of Andrew Johnson rising up against slavery, right, and doing what he did to get it down in the South when he wanted to reestablish it was not because he was there because he was a sincere man and wanted the end of slavery, was because his interests, his enemies, his perceived enemies were the ones who were in charge of the South, and he wanted them out. But he wanted slavery under his rulership and under his control. How can that happen? And this is the paradox of the human mind, right? And its quest, its crave for power. Nothing that is happening in geopolitics is rational. And I'm going to say that again. Nothing that is happening in the geopolitical realm is rational. Oftentimes it doesn't make sense. It's only when we understand systems of power that we begin to say, wow, oh, that person is linked to that organization, that political interest, that economic interest. Do we begin to understand? That is the time that we begin to understand, whoa, that's why they're doing it. Not because they're trying to fight for freedom of the world. Far from it. Far from it. So that is what we have to understand. There's nothing rational that they're doing. It's all a game. It's all a chess game. Iran said they had no nuclear weapons. American Congress, because that is what they're using, J.A. They're using the whole matter of these things. And, just like Venezuela, and they're using all of... Look at Delcy Rodriguez. Look at Delcy Rodriguez, who it seemed appeared she was talking to Kamala Person Besessor, and they seemed to have been at loggerhead. And at the end of the day, she was working with Qatar to get President Maduro out. So at this time, you cannot trust any leader. You cannot trust it. I'm not saying that you should go now and be disrespectful to them, but you just have to take them at their words and watch and look at what they are aligned with or to. Right? And that is what we saw. How could Delcy do what she did? And this was not like a conspiracy theory. It was reported in the Guardian newspaper of UK. Right? And Delcy Rodriguez is supposed to be a progressive, a left-wing personality. Okay? And the Guardian newspaper and several other newspapers there in the UK reported that Delcy Rodriguez had, connections with oligarchs from Qatar, and they worked, including the Vatican, to get Nicolas Maduro out of power. How could that be when the Vatican was saying that, oh, we don't want war and they should leave Nicolas Maduro alone? Yet, behind the scenes, it gave him up. Okay? So we have to understand that there is a lot of friction, a lot of nuances in this global politics, in this geopolitical, system of power that we have to understand. That they can do some crazy stuff in order and say some crazy things that make us feel as if they're on our side. And go back and read the history of the Civil War with Andrew Johnson. That was something that will move you. The way the man spoke, what he did to have, fought against slavery in the United States. Yet, when he went into power, when they eventually elected him as President of the United States, he met secretively with the same people that he said that he hated. Okay? With the same people. And had it not been for Congress and the power of God, slavery would have been reinstituted in the South under Andrew Johnson presidency in the United States. All right? So don't say now, you can ask that question. It's intelligent. Don't get me wrong now, J.A., you're correct to ask that question. Why would they be bombing? The United States be bombing Iran? And they can bomb too, because bombing means that you have to sell weapons to them. That's another thing too. I bomb you, so it means therefore that you're going to bomb me back. So both of us are buying weapons, right? And we can see that will continue without any end, because it's money. It's money making. That's why they're bombing us and bombing everybody. Why did they implement why did they even impose a pandemic? Why did they unleash, I should say, a pandemic upon us? Why? Why did they do that? Money. Follow the money. Vaccines and the millions of dollars that they generated through that system. Okay? What would cause them to do that? And to hurt the global economy, to shut down a global economy that makes them money. But obviously, they thought about it. They made money, but we didn't. Okay? So this is what we have to look at, and we have to analyze and get out of this. It's US versus Iran and Iran versus Spain. I am saying to you, say that it is US oligarchs, elites versus Iranian elites, oligarchs. It's not about the common man. Got it? Not about the common man. So we have here, Jace, I know that about Johnson and Reconstruction and how we abolish Reconstruction, nothing to do with the matter. Of course it has something to do with the matter. Because what the point I'm suggesting here is that somebody can seem to be that they are sincere and that they want freedom. And that is the whole matter of what the Iranians are fighting about. Aren't they fighting? And we think that they're fighting to stand up to American power. It has a lot to do with it. I'm just suggesting to you that people can, present to you five faces, and you think that they are real when they're not real. So the whole matter of the war with Iran, is it real, or is this an engineered war to re-image, to redesign the global economic and political structure? This is the important question that we need to ask. The Civil War was also designed. The Civil War was also designed to recreate another America. And the global elites, during the Reconstruction, the global elites actually concentrated power. And eventually, the same two people that were against each other, the North and the South, they came together, consolidated their power, and fought against American liberties. Okay? That is how the show is played. So we're seeing these so-called enemies, Iran versus United States, but we're saying, who are the enemies? Not them. Maybe they do have a few in that class, but we are the enemies. We are the ones who are going to suffer, just like people in America suffered after the Civil War and the Reconstruction. They gained something, but they lost a lot too. What about Anthony Johnson, a black man who fought to keep his slaves? I'm just saying to you. I'm just saying to you that you have good guys, you have bad guys. But what I'm saying to you, let's not get into the whole matter of Americans could have during the Civil War said, oh, the Northerners were great and the Southerners were the enemies. That is the sort of basic sort of foundation that history gives us, that the Northerners are the ones who were the freedom lovers. The North did not want to end slavery. All right? The U.S. North did not want to end slavery. Right? They didn't want the expansion of slavery to be like in California and other new soil states, right? With territories that were founded, in the Midwest. Okay, but they were anti-slavery. They were pro-slavery, but pro-Southern slavery, right? The Iranians, are they for freedom in the world, as we and I know freedom? or are they there to protect their own interests? And that's what we have to ask ourselves. Okay? But don't think that if Iran wins tomorrow, that we are going to be free, or we are not going to have to pay the consequences of the economic consequences of the war. That's what I'm asking. Not that I am siding with any side. I'm not siding with the US, and I'm not siding with any of them. It's a one global governance. Now, it doesn't mean that just like the pandemic, we all responded to it differently, right? So China, people in Latin America, people in the Caribbean, in Europe, etc., in Africa. But the system is going to be one. In the design was that we all take a medication. That was the design. And if we didn't take it, then we suffer the consequences. Okay? So it means, therefore, for them to have done that, all of them came together, even though they are so-called enemies. How is it that the pandemic, 2022, when that was raining and people were saying that they want to save lives, and yet still Biden and Russia went up into a war? And they wanted to save lives. Do wars save lives? Right? These people who were saying that they were enemies, friends for the pandemic, enemy for wars, or supposed enemies. Those wars were contrived or are contrived. They're not real wars. They're real in the sense that they're happening, right? But they're not like natural wars. They're not organic wars. These are contrived wars, engineered wars, to reimagine, to restructure, to redesign the global order. And that's what they're doing. I can tell you that after this war, if it does, I don't think it probably is going to end anytime soon, that we're going to have a digital economy from out of this war. This is going to create or recreate, refashion, redesign a different economic order. Make sure that you're sharing the live, because this is a very important discussion that we need to have in the Caribbean region, because we are going to be impacted severely. And yet, make sure your comments are coming in too. And during that, they weren't worried about climate change. Absolutely, they weren't. They weren't worried about climate change. Look at Mia Mottley, and she speaks so much about the global South, and and she wants the complete liberation of the global South. So maybe that I shouldn't even talk about Andrew Johnson. Let's talk about Mia Mottley, right? And Mia Mottley was on board with what was happening in Haiti and U.S. imperial agenda in Haiti. But when she speaks, you would think that she is the face of liberation, of Black liberation, and many people see her as that. But behind the scenes, she is connected to the global hierarchical structure, the global system of power. All right? So I'm just saying to us, and maybe let us say Barbados was a massive country with massive clout, and the United States, we could see Barbados under Miss Mia Mottley as a country that is standing up to the United States. But behind the scenes, she's not. Right? So this is what we have to understand. I'm not now on anybody's side. We take sides. I'm on the side of liberty. And I'm on the side of the Iranians because they are innocent. Right? The common man doesn't have anything to do with the war that is ongoing in Iran. Just like the United States, the ordinary citizen there doesn't have anything to do, for the most part. Some of them do support their leaders, but for the most part, many Americans don't have anything to do with the wars that the United States is waging around the world. They're against it, in fact. Okay? But the leaders and the economic interests are the ones, the bankers are the ones who are fanning the flame. Okay, so this is what I'm suggesting, and no more. Please share the live so that we can have the system distribute the video to as many. I can see that the algorithm doesn't want to, expand the videos, doesn't want to distribute the videos, but it's important that it is distributed. Okay, and I was asking those of you, when I dispatch the videos, do you see them? Do you see them on the homepage in the feed? I want to send a formal letter to YouTube in terms of asking, some of my viewers are suggesting that they might not be seeing the videos. Some people are also suggesting to me that they when you send your comments via the live, it takes a long time to reach me. I do not also delete any of your messages on YouTube. Never. Even if I disagree with your message, I do not delete any. So if it's being deleted and you write something, it doesn't appear, I am not doing it. All right? Obviously, it's a system. Stephen Knight, welcome. Do not forget the meeting that Pompeo had in Guyana when he summoned some of the Caribbean leaders. Right. Correct. Yeah, and he had one in, and then we had, on the Biden too, we had one in Jamaica, where some of the Caribbean leaders were also summoned. So what we see is that when you have two sides of the American empire. You have the neoliberal side and you have the neocon side. Which are you on? Which side are you on? Are you on the neoliberal side or are you on the neocon side? So as far as we can see, Miss Mia Motley is on the neoliberal side. She appears left-wing, right? But at the same time, that side is still an empire. It still enslaves. But it sounds very nice and they use nice words. But at the end of the day, she's still, supporting IMF and World Bank and their policies, which are actually destroying these economies, the same one that they say that they are actually building. Stephen is saying, right, it is a facade. It's a facade. And some of these wars also are a facade because they're using them now as pretext to redesign, to reshape the world. The very Civil War in the United States was used, and all wars, not only the Civil War of the United States, World War I, World War II, the Cold War, 9/11, all of those were used to reshape the global economic collapse of 2008. They were all engineered to redesign the world after the likeness of the global elites. And when we read about World War I, World War II, we find a lot of information that many of the people that we think were enemies and fighting against each other were sometimes really behind the scenes collaborating. All right? So that's what we have to understand. One would have thought, for example, that the Roman Catholic Church was against Hitler. We would have thought that based on what history tells us. But when we read lots of other sources, we find that Vatican actually protected Hitler. The United States also, we would have thought the United States was against Hitler and the Third Reich. But the very people on Wall Street were actually supporting him. How could the United States, a country that says it stands up for freedom and liberty, support the Third Reich? Right? There are also books suggesting that the Wall Street guys supported communism in Russia. And he said, how could a capitalist nation be supporting communism? Economic interests, right? So when they put on these sort of fad, and pretend a facade that these things are not happening and they're diametrically opposed, you have to watch it. Because then is when they are actually working together. But it's not we, the people. It is the global elites who are doing that and the ones who control the system of power. But they too have their grievances. They too have their conflicts. But the thing about it is that their conflicts are not ours. And we can't fight their conflicts. That's why we should not be engaged in their wars. We should not be sending our sons and our daughters to war for their interests. And that's why Smedley Butler wrote that war is a racket. So whether it's the Iranian war or it is the Venezuelan war or whatever war, it is a racket. And they want to send now and for us to invest our time or monies or physical, might or strength into fighting their wars, which are not going to free us in the first place. Okay. Now, how are these wars, the war in Iran, how is that going to affect? How is that war going to affect the cost of living in our society? What do you think is going to happen to the dollar? We have been talking about the dollar and how that could be. There was let me see if I could find it, a video that was online that I actually pulled up this morning. And we're going to look at a certain aspect of that, what the guy was saying in that video about the collapse of the US dollar. Okay, I'm going to share that with you now. Let me see if I can open it and then share it with you, and we'll talk about it. All right, let me see if I can get this here. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to share this with you now, and we're going to talk about this very shortly. So let me share my screen, and we look at this video, talk about it, because, you know, we have to get ourselves out of this herd thinking, right, and begin to analyze things more critically, which is lacking in our days. We have they're talking. Let me just look at this now. Share, and I'm going to see if I can put it up here. All right, so let us listen to what he's saying here. It's a very important video.
The President of the United States gave a speech, and a lot of people were looking forward to, hopefully, the announcement of the end of the war. But that's not what ended up happening.
President Trump warning Iran the entire country could be taken out if they do not make a deal.
Every bridge in Iran will be decimated by 12 o'clock tomorrow night, where every power plant in Iran will be out of business, burning, exploding, and never to be used again. I mean, complete demolition.
In the middle of that speech, the stock market futures dropped. Oil went up even more than before, and Bitcoin went down. And it's all because the Strait of Hormuz, the most important oil choke points on Earth, responsible for 20 million barrels a day, is still closed. We know it's closed because of the most important chart you can look at today, which is this one. It shows total tanker transit calls, which are still down. Now, some people believe that if this strait stays closed for another 2 to 3 weeks, which is virtually guaranteed at this point, based on what the president is saying, the global economy will then reach a breaking point where even if the war stops, it might be too late, and it would start a crisis all around the world. And there's a theory that this crisis was planned as a way to bring about a major change to the world and the monetary system. That's because every crisis has always been an opportunity.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity.
Here we are now with an economy in crisis, but with an incredible opportunity.
It's certainly a major crisis, but it also offers us a unique opportunity.
Unprecedented opportunity to rethink and reset.
The great opportunity for reset.
Opportunity for us to reset.
For a reset.
The president says, in part, quote, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will."
Now, what's interesting is that if you look throughout history, every single time there has been a crisis, the end result was more centralization of wealth and power. And here's a few examples. In 2008, the financial system almost collapsed. And within weeks, the Fed invents quantitative easing, where they buy trillions in assets and bail themselves out. In 2020, a global pandemic shuts down the world, and we're told to stay home. And within a few months, governments all around the world are talking about something called the Great Reset. Klaus Schwab, who's the founder of the World Economic Forum, publicly states that the pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. Right? COVID was the crisis, and the opportunity was global coordination of everyone's economies and currencies and centralized governments.
Your Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, distinguished heads of state and government, the future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room.
The point is, there's a pattern throughout history. Every single time there's been a crisis, there was an opportunity for central planners to change how the world worked. Now, I'm not saying that there's some shadowy room somewhere where there's 12 people that plan all this. I don't think that's how it works. But what I am saying is that when there's a crisis, whether it's real or not, the people that are closest to power, who saw it coming, have always used it as an opportunity to upgrade the system in a way that centralized power. So the question that I want to explore in this video is, what is the next crisis? And what is the opportunity to centralize more power? Let me help explain what I think all of this might look like. And with that said, let's get into it. Hi, my name is Austerity. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for the next once in a millennial lifetime event. All right, so I'm going to spend most of this video explaining the next crisis and then the opportunity in the last part of the video, which I think is probably one of the most interesting things I've ever put together. Okay, so there's a number that economist Luke Gromen talks about, which is called the net international investment position. It sounds complicated, but what it measures is America's financial balance sheet with the rest of the world. Like, how much of our stuff do foreigners own versus how much of their stuff do we own? And why is that important? It's important because if foreigners own a lot of your stuff, they have more influence over the value of it if, for example, they decide to sell it for whatever reason. Ideally, you want foreigners to own less of your stuff in a conflict situation. Okay, so right now, that number is negative 87% of GDP. What does that mean? To put it in perspective, after the first Gulf War, it was only negative 7%. After the second Gulf War, negative 12%. After the 2008 financial crisis, it was still only negative 15%. But then something happened. We just kept selling assets. We sold our stocks, we sold our real estate, our treasury bonds, and who did we sell it to? We sold it to China, to Europe, to Japan, and to anyone running a trade surplus against the United States. And that is why today, foreigners own about $70 trillion in US dollar assets. 9.4 trillion of that is US Treasury bonds alone. Now, here's why that might be bad. Those same places, Europe, Japan, China, Southeast Asia, are also the most dependent on oil going through the Strait of Hormuz. And that strait is obviously closed. But they still need to buy oil. And oil is priced in dollars. So they need dollars. Now, I've got a question. Where do foreign governments and central banks get dollars from when they need them really fast? The answer is their dollar assets, right? They're US stocks, US bonds, they're US treasuries. They have to sell them. And that's already happening. Foreign central bank holdings of US treasuries at the New York Fed just went down to the lowest level since 2012. In 4 weeks, tens of billions of dollars are gone. And that's just the beginning, because it'll probably get worse. Why is it going to get worse? It's going to get worse because when countries sell treasuries, treasury yields go up. And when yields go up, the cost of financing America's almost $40 trillion debt goes up as well. Now, the most important bond to look at right now is the 10-year treasury and its yield, which was in the threes when this war started, but it went up in the last 4 weeks. Now, the question is there a point at which bond yields hitting a certain level breaks the economy? Like, how high does this number have to go for things to start to get really bad for everyone in the US economy? And according to the best research I was able to find, the danger zone is somewhere between 4.6 and 4.8%. And once we get there, we could enter into what they call a debt-death spiral. What does that mean? It means the more expensive it is to borrow, the bigger the deficit. Bigger deficits mean more borrowing. More borrowing means higher rates, and it's a never-ending loop. And at almost $40 trillion in debt, that spiral happens really fast, which is also why Jerome Powell said what he said recently about the debt growth rate in the US being unsustainable and ending badly. And it's not necessarily that this 40 trillion number is too high. It's that it's growing faster and faster and faster. And that's bad because that doesn't just burden our generation, but future generations as well. So the question is, what can the US do about it? And there's 3 possible outcomes, and here's what they are. Outcome number 1, let yields go up, right? Let the market do what it does. Treasury yields go to 5, 6, maybe higher. That crushes the US stock market. Why? Well, because investors would rather take a guaranteed 5 to 6% return in the bond market than risk it in the stock market. And because stocks and tax receipts, aka what the government collects in taxes from us, those move together. And when markets go down, tax revenues go down. So deficits explode. Housing gets weaker, consumer spending collapses, banks take losses, and we enter into a recession. And because of that negative 87% net international investment position, this recession triggers a debt death spiral that sort of takes the rest of the world with us. Not good. Outcome number 2, print money at the same time oil prices are going up. The Fed steps in, it does what it does, quantitative easing, it buys treasuries, it caps yields, and it does what's called yield curve control. It saves the bond market. But you're also putting liquidity into an economy that's experiencing an oil shock, and that causes inflation. Economist Luke Gromen thinks that we could see inflation that makes 2021 look mild. Double digits may be worse. Outcome number 3, walk away from Iran. Just announce, okay, we won, we're leaving now, right? We did it, which might sound like a good option, except here's what's going to happen if the US picks option 3. The rest of the world watches America start a war. It watches the US fail to reopen this major shipping lane, and the world watches as the US retreats. Okay, why is that bad? It's bad because if the US picks option 3, the world then realizes that the US is not as powerful as it used to be, and it doesn't have the influence to restore order. The policeman of the world sort of lost his gun, right? So the media will then start putting out headlines that read, "Is Iran the US Suez Canal moment?" Pay attention to some variation of that headline. If you're not sure what it means, this comes from Luke Gromen. It means it is the end of the US empire. Because remember, before the US empire, it was the British Empire that ruled the world. But Britain lost that status because of its Suez Canal moment in 1956, and it never recovered its global dominance. If the US retreats and fails in restoring this order, it sort of accelerates every country's decision to price their oil in something other than dollars. Countries would say, okay, I guess I don't need to use dollars anymore because the US can't protect me and it can't enforce the rules anyway. I'm going to trade with other countries in whatever currency I can find, right? Which also means a weaker dollar, which is also inflationary. So every outcome sort of leads to inflation and a weaker dollar. Now the question is, of all these 3 options, which one is the US going to pick? And based on everything we know so far, the option that the US will most likely pick is going to be option number 2. They print into rising oil prices. And the Fed's balance sheet, which is right here, which was $9 trillion at its peak and has been shrinking, starts going back up into a crisis. So money printer go burr again, if you remember that from 2020. The technical term for money printer go burr is, of course, quantitative easing, or QE. That is the option the US will most likely pick. But there's a very big catch because there's different types of QE. One of them does not affect your investment portfolio, and the other one does. Let me explain which QE I think the US will pick. There's type 1 QE, which is what the Fed did in 2008. That's when they bailed out the banks. It's considered non-inflationary. It did not trigger a spike in asset prices. The rich did not get richer. Well, technically, yes, the bankers that got bailed out got richer, but the market assets did not inflate. Why? Because remember, the financial system was collapsing, right? Banks were sitting on mountains of toxic, worthless mortgage assets. The Fed stepped in and bought those bad assets directly from the banks. That cleaned up their balance sheets, right? At face value, there was no new money that entered the broader economy. The central Papa Bank was like, hey, it's okay, guys, we'll forgive you for all those bad loans you gave out. Don't even worry about it, right? It's essentially a cleanup, and it happens completely within the banking system without the money flowing into the real world. That's also why 2008's QE didn't cause significant consumer price inflation, right? That's type 1 QE, aka money printing. Type 2 QE is what happened in 2020. And this one is completely different. Instead of buying assets directly from the banks and then just forgiving them, the Fed bought assets from non-banks and corporations and pension funds and regular institutions. And when that happens, those sellers deposit the money into their bank accounts. So banks are now forced to create new deposits. New money floods into the broader economy and people have more buying power. But the supply of stuff in the world didn't change. So then what happened? Prices went up. Not right away, there was a lag of about 12 to 18 months. The Fed did huge type 2 QE money printing in March 2020, and then 18 months later, inflation hit 9%. The original economists who created this term QE actually warned this inflation would happen, but nobody listened. Instead, the media told us this. These were the headlines. Here's why economists don't expect trillions of dollars in economic stimulus to create inflation. They were all wrong. In 2020, BlackRock presented this exact type 2 QE at something called the Jackson Hole Conference. They essentially told the Fed what the plan was, and then 6 months later, BlackRock went ahead and did it. Now, how all of this is related to what I'm talking about is that option number 2 is the option that the US will have to pick, printing money into the oil spike. The inflation that might happen after that could be a lot higher than 9%, 12 to 18 months after that QE. That would make this graph much, much worse, right? This is where economic growth slows down and inflation goes up. That is called stagflation, and it's very, very bad. Okay, so that is the setup. That's the world as I see it. And the next important question of this video is, well, what is the next phase? What comes after this? What is the opportunity to centralize power? And here's the best theory that I've come across. In order to understand it, you have to put yourself in the mindset of these central planners, the people who influence the world's policies. Here's the core problem that they have. The first major problem is AI and automation. Once AI is allowed to be unleashed into the economy, it's going to displace a lot of jobs. It's going to be painful because not everyone will be able to adapt. But let's say they do. Let's say, optimistically speaking, AI becomes so productive that we find ourselves in a perfect utopian world of abundance where no one needs to work. What's going to happen then? I think inevitably, we're going to need some sort of universal basic income. If that happens, though, that's going to give society way too much free time, and people will start waking up. They'll start organizing. The political process becomes a real thing again. And that's not good if you're a central planner, because you want to be in control of that system, and you want people to be reliant on it. And you want people to be too busy thinking about how to pay their bills, right? That's problem number 1, and it needs to be solved. Problem number 2, though, is the US has almost $40 trillion in debt. It's growing faster than the economy, and now with yields going up, the cost of that debt is growing faster and faster. So how do you solve that problem? The way to solve it is that you find someone else to hold the debt for you. You distribute it to the entire world, but instead of distributing it through inflation, right? Because that only works as long as you're able to export it, as long as other countries want your assets. But what if they don't, right? And what if the next distribution phase is not the institutions? What if it's through people, right? What if the best way to distribute this debt is already in everybody's pocket? So here's what I think the next phase of this new monetary system is going to look like. In a nutshell, what I think will happen is the US debt gets privatized and uploaded to the world. Right? Every major corporation will become a bank. Every major app will become a wallet. And every person on earth with a smartphone will become an unknowing creditor to the United States government. They will solve the debt problem and the AI problem at the same time with a digital currency system that funds the government, controls the UBI payments that feeds the people that lost their jobs to AI in the first place, and it gives the central planners a button that they can turn on or off for every single person's financial life. Okay, hold on. That sounds crazy, right? What does that even look like? All right, so imagine Tesla announces a digital wallet. You load it up with dollars. Tesla takes those dollars and invests them into US Treasury bonds, earning, let's say, 4 or 5%. Tesla keeps a little, passes some back to you in the form of rewards, discounts on your next car, maybe charging credits, maybe an actual yield, right? You're happy because your money's working for you. Tesla's happy because they're earning a spread on their deposits, and the US government is happy because someone bought more of their debt. Now multiply that across every major corporation on Earth. You'll get Apple Wallet, Amazon Wallet, McDonald's Wallet, Google Pay with yield, every airline, every retailer, every platform we already use. All of them will become distribution channels for US government debt. All of them holding US treasuries as the backing for whatever digital asset or rewards program they'll offer you. Now, if that sounds like some crazy theory, this is literally what the legislation moving through Congress right now requires. It's called the Genius Act. And what it says is, any company that wants to issue a stablecoin, a dollar-pegged digital asset, must hold US treasuries or equivalent safe assets as the backing, dollar for dollar, which means corporations will have to buy real government debt first. And this has already been successfully tested with a company called Tether, the company behind the biggest stablecoin in the world. It holds over $120 billion in US treasuries right now. Right, that makes them one of the biggest holders of US government debt on the planet. In fact, bigger than some countries even. And Tether was the system's test. Now, imagine this same dynamic, but with the brand recognition of Tesla, the distribution of Apple, the loyalty programs of every airline and retailer we already use. You're not asking people in Argentina or Vietnam to trust some sketchy crypto company they've never heard of. You're asking them to trust the brands they already love and use in their own countries, brought to them by the courtesy of freedom. And in exchange for that trust, they'll get yields, they'll get discounts, they'll get utility, they'll get to protect their savings and purchasing powers from their corrupt dictators and governments, right? Now, behind the scenes, they become creditors to the United States government. That is how you offload trillions and trillions of dollars in debt globally. All you need is CBDCs, legislation, and 8 billion smartphones. Now, unfortunately, this system, as convenient and generous as it sounds, is also going to be the most sophisticated financial control grid that will ever be built. And the reason I say that is because it's also already been tested. Tether has already frozen wallets. It's happened dozens of times. It has sanctioned addresses, it's flagged accounts, it's regulatory requests. All it takes is a line of code and they can turn your money off. Now, you'll still own your money, technically. It just might not work on Tuesdays or in certain stores to buy certain things, or if you said something the algorithm didn't like, or you didn't get vaccinated, or if you bought too much meat that week, and meat is energy intensive and we need to conserve energy, right? And that's just Tether. It's a relatively small private company, but scale this capability to a system where every major corporation's digital wallet is going to be susceptible to US regulation, backed by US treasuries, governed by US law. And I think you're going to get something that makes the SWIFT banking system look like peanuts. Now, SWIFT can cut a whole country off from the global financial system. That's a lot of power. But this new system will be able to target anyone, no matter where they live, even if that country and its laws prohibit this system. It's already too late. It's outside their control. So what are they going to do to fight that? You will start seeing them disable the App Store and turn off the internet. That's how they're going to fight it. And the beautiful, or maybe the terrifying part about this, is that no one forced anyone into this system. We've already all signed up to it. So I don't know what the next crisis will be, whether it's going to be stagflation, hyperinflation, nuclear war, a 9/11 type event, a false flag, or maybe energy lockdowns where no one can travel. But regardless of what it ends up being, I think this digital financial control grid with CBDCs is their opportunity. Now, the question I had for myself is, what can I do to protect myself against any of this?
Okay, I think that we got the gist, don't we? Haven't we got the gist? Very, very important video that he shared with us. And I think that, the whole matter of how these systems of power are working together, right? As he suggested, no matter where you are, even if your country does not sign up for the rule, it means therefore that you will have to be a part of it. And there is no way that you can miss it, right? So do you see how they use, different wars and different modes of operation to redesign the world, as it were? We have Stephen Knight saying all that did was made his friends richer. Yes. And Stephen Knight is saying, never let a crisis go to waste. Right. And we hear that often, that we should not allow crisis to go to waste. And this is a crisis that we're facing. Only that the global elites are the ones who are using the crisis against us, the people. Okay. So we are going to be a little bit surprised that, but look at what he was suggesting too with Moscow. Right, suggesting that, they are also doing that. We know that China practices that system of credit score, and that if you do not accede to government policies and you don't do what the government wants you to do, the government, as he's suggesting, can block your account. You might have money in your account, right, but you might not be allowed to use it on Tuesday because you disagreed with the government on Tuesday, if you know what I mean. So when we're thinking that the United States and China are enemies, when they are creating the same economic structure and system, are we really thinking? Are we really thinking? Are we really understanding how the system is designed to keep us down? Or are we thinking, choosing a country, a leader, and behind the scenes, they're working together? Okay. You need to read up on the Genius Act. I think that we need to talk about that act because we're more looking at the war. But lots of times, while they are pronouncing different things about the war, they are in Congress and in Parliament, they're passing laws that are designed to go against our freedoms. Trump said they could buy oil from him, right? Because everything will be privatized, as he's suggesting here. But when you think, this was a brilliant video. And when you think that, the United States is thinking of privatizing its debt, well, it, to some extent, it has done so through inflation. But the fact of the matter, to be selling the debt to private entities, and in other words, we are the ones who will have to take it on, because when these entities or corporations permeate our countries, then we will have to take on U.S. debt, right? So this is going to be one of the casualties of war, that we are going to be left with the United States debt through privatization, or go to the straight and open it. And Thales is saying this is why people should not pick sides. You can't pick sides. And I'm not saying now we are on the side of freedom. We are on the side of the Iranians who are caught up in this unnecessary war. We are on the side of every freedom lover. Okay, of every peaceful people, wherever they are, whether they're in Iran, they're in Russia, they're in the United States, Barbados, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, wherever they are, we are on their sides. But when we begin now to just look at the superficial, because what we're seeing on the news is superficial, and these wars are superficial. They're happening. This is not these wars are indeed happening, but they are contrived wars. And their wars to sort of redesign, as he said, don't let a crisis go to waste. And right now in Congress, as he's suggesting, they're passing the Genius Act. And that is to digitize the economy. And none of us, as he's saying, is going to escape that sort of digitalization, that sort of digital economy. And we will have a wallet. If you understand China, they have the WeChat, and they don't necessarily use dollars as we use dollars. They're able to make all transactions on their WeChat account or whatever account that they have there. And the credit score is that if you do not accede, if you do not comply, if you're not compliant as a citizen, then your account can be, suspended. Yeah, as far as the Chinese credit score, I heard that from scores of content creators like Scott Ritter that it is Western propaganda. It's no different than the credit score to get loans and apartments. I don't believe that. I think that it is a system that is there. That, yeah, because they don't use cash, and they all. I used to have a lot of Chinese students, and that I taught actually from China, actually, and they told me about it. right? They told me that this is not propaganda, it is there. But they were bragging to me and said they don't understand how Western countries don't have this system because they like it, it's convenient. But when I was discussing things with them, let us say we're talking about politics, when I was teaching them, they were very careful of telling they would just be mum rather, when I talk about, anything that is, anything that has to do with any controversial stuff, they became quiet. And they told me, in more than, very quietly that, they have to be careful what they say because your account can be suspended. It happens in China. We might exaggerate it in some ways, don't get me wrong, but this is standard practice in China. Okay? And we should not be saying that this is propaganda. Scott Ritter shouldn't be saying that because we saw what happened during the pandemic. We saw what happened with the truckers. And when they were trying to assist the whole matter of getting this nonsense, what was happening in Canada, stopped, that their accounts, like the PayPal accounts, were frozen. Okay, so we should not think that this is something that is wishful thinking. It is real. Okay, and when Mr. what's his name, Doctor, the guy that David Woods was on the program on technocracy, he talked to us about that. Okay, so these are things that are coming, and the Genius Act that the guy was telling us about, that's what it was literally saying. He read it, and he's saying to us that we'll have a wallet. And even countries that do not accede to that sort of principle will have to accept it. They won't be exempt from it. Okay, so this is not any fairy tale. No, these are not theories. These are practical things that are going to happen in the West. Do you remember the pandemic again too, that when we talked about the lockdowns were done first in China. And in the West here, we're saying, oh, well, and they were even critiquing what was happening in China, criticizing it. And wow, how could they lock down their people for such a long time? And we ended up doing the same thing. Have we forgotten? Has Scott Ritter forgotten? There are some things I trust from Scott Ritter, but not everything I trust from him. Do you? I don't trust everybody. I listen to them. And I take what is for me, and what is not for me, I throw it out, because many of these guys sometimes are phony. And he was also involved with the United States military-industrial complex. What's it? Convenient and controlling. Right, it is convenient. It is convenient. But at the same time, it is controlling. And we see here with the algorithm, I'm dealing with YouTube and the algorithm. I know it's how these things operate. And they tell you that, what you're saying is not true, and they totally ignore your point, because they are not going to permit certain, right now, even YouTube is going to be worse. When that system comes in place, it's going to be worse in terms of what they allow, what content they allow to be published and uploaded onto their platform, right? We don't want to hear these things, and I'm wondering when these things come us now and we can't, buy and sell, because the Bible tells us that there is going to be a system, the mark of the beast, that is not going to allow us to buy or sell, lest we receive the mark. We forget about these things, that these things are going to happen. And even whether you believe, you're a believer, you don't believe in religion or whatever, it is going to happen. And even secular people talk about the mark of the beast. It's an expression that everybody knows and talks about, including during the pandemic. That was a very, very standard, word was used, the mark of the beast. Everybody was talking about it. But since the pandemic is a little bit over with, we have forgotten, we're moving on. We think the world is normal, even though the world is abnormal. We think we're living under normal circumstances, and it's not so. Why do we forget our lessons? Why have we forgotten the lessons of history and recent history? It wasn't like history 1940s or the 1920s. This was 2020 and beyond, and we've forgotten that. Thinking that what is happening in China, exactly what happened in China happened here, happened in the West. And I understand that when they were discussing it, that the Western doctors and politicians said they're not going to accept what China is doing. That's what they said, but they experimented with us and we accepted it because we're stupid. We're stupid. It is sad. To be frank with you, where the world is heading and the knowledge that people have really is basic, and we have to get over now, as I'm suggesting to you, siding with one side, saying that Scott Ritter is this better and whatever. Yeah, lots of the podcasts that we have online now are just siding with one power. I used to, for example, listen to Redacted almost every day, and until I saw that Clinton was on the side of Trump. You know, how could you be siding with somebody thinking that he is, you know, and he's always thinking it's Israel, when the United States and Trump, they are also doing what they are doing and doing it deliberately. But we tend to you know, so the United States, those who are on the side of the United States are going to side with Israel. It's Israel forcing the United States to do what they're, it's not Israel forcing the United States to do, because who gives aid to whom, right? Yeah, those TV personalities speak out both sides of their mouth. Yeah, that's what they do. You know, these podcasters are all, and that is what gives they feed the algorithm with a certain what you want to hear, and then the algorithm accepts it. Hundreds and thousands of subscribers, and then at the end of the day, people leave there empty, not understanding that there's no truth in what they're saying. Then we have, if any man worship the beast and his image, right, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. And that's exactly so. And when we look at also the fact that the head is where the frontal lobe is, decision. So some of us will actually know, we know what is true. We see what is happening. But because pressure, your friends are not believing what you believe. You can't allow your friends to ridicule you. How can you say that everybody's working together? It sounds stupid, right? That the entire global system is designed to enslave us. No, because Iran is there. Oh, can't you see they're standing up to the United States? Are they? Are they really standing up to the United States? Okay? And these are the things that we have to ask ourselves. Are they really? And how is that benefiting you in your neck of the woods? Okay, is it sending up the cost of oil? Is it going down? Now, Faith is saying that, so how do we survive this and be saved? Well, the only way we can survive this is, one, we have to make informed decision. And the pandemic, we did not make informed decision. Had the world come against what was happening and stood up, they would not have been successful. But too many of us were, one, silent, and we acceded, we complied. And I can tell you, I think after the pandemic, we lost the battle. We lost the battle because that was on a global scale. It was not just in Barbados. It was not just in Trinidad. It was just not in the United. It was a global pandemic with global, legal infrastructure that they designed. And it was not just scientific. It was legal. It was economic. It was political, it was religious, because remember, we couldn't go to church. Yet still, the casinos were actually open. Do you know that there was a pastor from a church who said that he was worshiping and he was, acceding to their standards about distancing and wearing the mask and all of what they said that they should do when they gathered in a public space. So he said he complied with all those rules. And the police came and locked him down and said, you can't have church, even though he complied, okay? Then he decided that he saw that the casinos were opened. So he decided to rent out, the pastor decided to rent out a space in one of these casino buildings. And the government officials came and locked them down and said, you can't do it. So they allowed all of these brothels and casinos and whatever to be opened, but the church could not be opened. Oh, and it's not religious. These guys are just political and they're just economic. Oh, that's what you think. Because there is also a religious agenda. That's why they did what they did. Okay? And the schools were locked down because they didn't want us to come together to talk about what was happening and to use our intellects to say this happened in history. Let's not do this. We were isolated. That's how they divide and what? And they conquer us. Go and Whole Food, and there are some Walmarts that have that palm reader. The system is here, right? The system is here. There's no doubt about it. The guy did a brilliant, and you should go and watch that video. That was a brilliant piece of video that he produced, and he deserves his views. I think his views is up now to 1 million. He deserves those views. Some people on YouTube don't deserve the views because they're just talking nonsense. But the fact that guy deserved well thought out, and that system is here. It's here. But what is the media talking about? Oh, the Strait of Hormuz, though important it is important, the Strait of Hormuz and the fact that it is closed and we want it to be open. The war, yes, that also needs to stop. But nobody is talking, Sandra, about the Genius Act. And that the digital economy is right here, where we are going to be controlled. Many people were on the side of Trump because he promised peace, right? While Kamala is Hillary Clinton's puppet and was campaigning with her criminal Dick Cheney and promised to the most lethal. That NATO, right? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, they are both working for the same masters. Right? We saw that during Israel. Look at what happened during the whole Israeli Palestine sort of debacle. And Kamala Harris was not. She didn't move to understand that many Palestinians were killed. Yet still the Democratic Party always stands up for the left, and Palestinians are great, and they believe in racial equality. Oh yeah? Oh yeah. And they suppressed the children, the students on the various campuses who were protesting against what was happening in Palestine. You know what they did. You saw that, right? You saw that. It was like a Trump sort of style way of suppressing their rights to protest, right? Even professors were suppressed. So they're the same. And you went and you voted for them. You still, I don't want Trump. Trump is chaos. So is, the same guy there, Kamala Harris and Biden. Because they were relentless with their V. Had to take it. Many people were on the side, right? So we talked about that. So yeah, that is true. And we have here Phyllis saying NATO, North Atlantic Terrorist Organization. They all can be described as, because that's what they're doing to us. They're terrorizing us. When we think about what is happening in Iran, war unnecessary, totally unnecessary. Okay? And yet the United States decided that they were going to do it. No matter what the citizens said, they were going to do it because they want a new world. The financial collapse of 2008, another unnecessary thing that they could have averted, but they understood that they needed to reorganize the global economic structure system. Okay? And they bailed out wow. Hello. Okay. Are you hearing me? I'm back. I don't know what happened to the system. I'm so sorry. I'm back. Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me? Are you hearing me? Please let me know if you're hearing me. Don't know what happened. I was just disconnected. It was rather strange. Can you hear me, or am I still on? Okay. Yeah. So we were looking at the fact that, yeah, and talking about the digital. What do you think? Let me ask you. What do you think about the digital economy? What do you think? What are the consequences? What impact? How will that impact us as a Caribbean region? This whole digital economy. What do you think about it? Yes, good. Thank you so much. Yes. What do you think about? Yeah. What do you think are going to be some of the consequences for this digital economy that is ahead? Because it's not if it's going to be, it's going to be when are we going to have the digital economy? When is it going to be put in place? It's not a matter of if anymore. We're going to have a system of tracking and economic surveillance where we are going to be surveilled. Everything we buy, okay? And they're also talking about universal income, because AI is going to create that, the universal income, where we are going to just, get a basic income. Everybody, whether you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're, whatever you are, a teacher, you just get a basic income, universal basic income. But what do we think about a digital economy? How is that going to impact our freedoms? How do you think that is going to impact our freedoms? Or if you want to talk about something that you learned from the video that the guy raised, any point that the video that I just showed you, any point that you want to highlight that he raised, any important thing that caught your attention in what he said, substance of what he said, because he said a lot of things that are really of substance that we should be thinking and discussing in the region. Okay? So he highlighted the fact that the global system is connected. All right, the global system is connected, and most of these, disasters are connected. Yes, so we have to. Yes, yes, Stephen. Thank you so much. I think what is happening is that there's a delay. I don't know why there is a delay in the comments. I am not sure what is happening, and I did tell YouTube that there is a delay in the system. The offloading of debt caught my attention. Yes, this is also a very important gaming night. This is, the offloading of debt, and to privatize debt is something that is, and it sounds that they would do something like that, because guess what? The debt is too much. Almost $40 trillion in debt. And already the United States is a technocracy. And David Woods did talk about that, and he spoke about the fact that this is actually happening, and corporations are going to unite with government to take away our freedoms. Okay. Any other point that you wanted to highlight from the video? Seems to me that the what you call it now, the comments are delaying. There is a delay in the comments coming in. I don't know. Something is happening where the algorithm chooses not to distribute the videos. Seems very clearly right now that they are limiting the lives, even though we're having a healthy discussion and the live is active. The algorithm chooses not to distribute the videos. Yeah, so we have here short delay, right? It's a short delay. Yeah, it's a short delay, but I'm getting it not in real time. I'm getting it not in real time. So we have to understand that. Yes. Then we have here very interesting discussion. Thank you so much, Clive. Thank you so much for, yeah. So we can see that what is happening now with the world economy, and that we're heading for another revolution, another phase of the global financial infrastructure. First, we had the Second World War, and that created another financial, after the likeness of the United States, of course, post-war, right? Then the United States decided to enter into other wars, and it also broke its economy. And if you read the history of the 1970s, economic history of the 1970s, the United States was in fact about to collapse. Same discussions like they were having back then, we're having it now, right? people thought that the other countries, Europe was actually growing at the time, because Europe at that time was not fighting wars. So Europe had already paid back its debt from the Marshall Plan and was growing, while the United States was retreating economically. What did it do? It sat and it created this oil disaster, this oil, problem that we had. The oil, what do you call it? What's the oil? What? I'm not even thinking right today. But the oil sort of problem that we had, the global oil disaster that we had in the 1970s, right? And that led to what? The United States creating the petrodollar. And they saved the life of the United States economy. Then fast forward now again, and we had the financial collapse. That was also another design, another reinvention of the United States economy. Then we got to the COVID-19, and then now we have this war on Iran. And oil is at the forefront again. Okay? The oil with also the war on Venezuela. Oil was also at the forefront of that discourse. Yeah. So we have YouTube does not like this conversation that we are having. They don't like the channel itself, and I've been trying to get to understand why. Every morning I wake up, I see very good metrics for my videos, and then afterwards they don't send the videos out. So I want to know from you if you're receiving the videos in your page, because I wanted to send them a letter, and I want you guys to let me know if you are seeing my videos in the homepage when I upload the videos. Are you seeing them in your homepage, in the feed? Or do you have to go searching for the videos? Because, it's like they don't want to admit that that is happening. So we have here embargo, right? The embargo, right? So that is where we are now, and we need to take stock. We need to be aware that this world is changing and changing rapidly. I see them in, okay, good. So you see them in the recommend. So they're in fact showing on the homepage. Can others say if you're seeing my videos? Because I find it very strange that, they were being shown in recent times and then they just went down. And I'm not seeing a lot of people that I normally see commenting are no longer being seen. I don't know what is happening. But if you're seeing them, then that means that YouTube is sending them out to the homepage, and you're seeing them as soon as they are uploaded. Try to interact with them. And I also have a community page notice. I'm doing a poll. I actually set up a poll on my community page. Please fill out that poll and interact with and write something in the comment section so that I can have something to show to YouTube in terms of whatever technical glitches that I might be experiencing on the channel. I can send it to them because they're very difficult to crack, and we're going into that direction right now in terms of they are inflexible. They are going to be inflexible, and no matter what you say, if the algorithm says something, the algorithm is going to have the last word. Okay, so that's where we're living now in the time. So the guy's video is something that should have resonated with all of us because we can see it, right? And the dollar cannot continue as it is right now. It's going to die. The dollar is going to die, definitely. That's not a matter of if, it's when. Okay, any other comments? Any questions? Before you can comment on anything, could be something else other than the IMF. But since we were dealing with the IMF versus the Caribbean austerity in a time of war, that's what we're dealing with. And, even though the United States citizens might not deal with the IMF directly, but we can see that they do indirectly, right? Because when the wars are being waged, there are lots of cuts in the United States, right? Cuts on healthcare, cuts on education, other social safety networks. So, in other words, we deal with the IMF directly, the United States citizens deal with it indirectly, right? In terms of the austerity. Because right now there's a lot of austerity in America, as American citizens have to bear the cost of fighting these wars, whether in Iran or in Venezuela, wherever the wars are fought, right? So that's what we need to understand. That's what we need to understand. Any other comment, question? Let me hear your comments. Let me hear your question. Okay, yes, I can see. Good. I see the videos being advertised, but not always. Any channel that tells the truth about the Vatican starts having trouble. Yes, that's exactly what happens. That's exactly what happens. Yeah, I can see that many people are not seeing the videos because there just a lot of the interaction has just declined steeply. Overnight. It didn't happen even gradually. It happened overnight. And I'm trying to tell them, and they're telling me that it's nothing is wrong. Everything is okay. And I know everything is not okay, but this is where we are in now the stream of things, and we just have to accept things as they are. But yeah, thank you for telling me that, Marie Antoinette. Any other question, comment? Anything that we learned from the video that the guy presented? I think his name is Andre, but I think his video was excellent. I saw it this morning. I thought I would share it with you guys. Any question, any comments? If we don't, then I think I can end the live. I thought more of you would have been here because the IMF and the World Bank, but make sure you like the live before you exit, and you go over to the communities page and respond to the poll that I've made. Okay, let me see from Gaming is saying here. That's unfortunate, man, but all you can do is continue to improve in different way and collab. There's Ernesto Cook, Caribbean Classroom, another channel, some themes, it will help your growth. Yeah, I think that, one of the things about it is that the algorithm is something that it seems to be undefeatable. And, yeah, but thank you so much, Gaming, King Jr., for your advice. Any other comment? Any other, what you call it now? Question? Any other question or any comment that we can pertinent to the discussion or anything that is on your mind? We should create our own our own channel, our own monetary system. That's what you're saying. That is that GJ. Are you saying that we should create our own monetary system, or are you saying instead of lagging behind and depending on their system, we should create our own monetary system? Yeah. The thing about it is that the system is controlled. I don't know at this stage if we could create another system outside of theirs. As he's saying in the video, and it's said in the act, that no country, irrespective of if you're not on board with the laws, of the digital economy, you will not be exempt. So we can see that it's almost our own media. I got you, our own media. I got you, yes. Well, how are we going to create our own? Is there a way we can create our own media? Not sure if it will be sent out to the people, right? And that we want the message to go out to. But we could create media. I don't know the distribution, even though I am not also being distributed here on this algorithm on YouTube. Our own AI, social media, and barter system. Yeah, it requires lots of money. Do we have the money to do all of that? We need to do more research on this Catholic society and see how it can benefit us. Yeah, you're right. But I think the Catholic society does a lot of underhand things, secrecy, and they're engaged in things that we don't want to be engaged in. That's how they get their money. That's how they get their influence, through bribery and deceits and, being engaged in drug trafficking and human trafficking and all of that stuff that we don't want to be engaged in, right? So what we could learn from the Catholic Church in terms of, I really don't know if we could learn from them, because it's so dark a church that I don't know if there's anything to learn from them. But what we can try to do is to educate as much our people as we can. I don't know if there are people are, the ones in the higher echelon, definitely they're propagandized and they have a system that they believe in. But is that good if they don't challenge it? Because the Catholic Church is almost like the Muslim world, that you can't challenge its teachings. Even if you disagree with them at an intellectual level, you cannot criticize their doctrines. So there's no difference between really the Catholic Church and communism in terms of the authoritarianism that exists in many of these countries. Any other question? But we should become independent. We should, but I don't know if we'll be able to build structures, that oppose their system, because we'll be taken down. Yeah, we'll be taken down. Any other comment, question? All right, so since we have no further question and no other, comments, I think we can call it a day. And hopefully, we will be able to share the live, like the live and share it and send it to as many people. So that's the only way we can do it, also to put it up on your platforms, your social media platforms, on your YouTube, on your whatever. You can cut clips, whatever, and send it out, and so that the more people will be exposed to the channel, since the algorithm is not interested in doing so. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you in another one. Ciao.